In the forests of central Ohio, the spirit of a fierce native warrior roams. The mid-1700s to early 1800s were contentious. As pioneers pushed ever westward, tribes fought amongst each other, and white armies fought each other and the natives along the western border of a newborn nation. Thomas Lyons, a fierce native warrior, quickly became known as a bad man to cross. Ugly, inside and out, he enjoyed riling all factions, sometimes helping the British and American soldiers, sometimes fighting alongside his native brothers, sometimes terrorizing settlers, and sometimes trading food and goods with the pioneers. Fighting in war was a way of life that Tom Lyons excelled in. He defeated many enemies in battle, slaying them and collecting their tongues. He kept the tongues of his enemies as trophies of war, as proof of his prowess. Tom wore his trophies strung on a necklace. Thomas Lyons' trophies numbered 99, and he boasted often that he would make that number an even 100 before he died. Except that boast was never fulfilled. Before he could collect his 100th tongue, Tom Lyons was ambushed and killed along a stagecoach road running through the Mohican River Valley in what now is known as the Mohican State Park, above the beautiful Lyons Falls. Roaming the land as he did in life, Tom searches for his final battle and his final trophy to this day, his spirit unable to rest until he strings the 100th tongue on his gruesome trophy necklace. Welcome to A&A's Tall Tales. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Amanda.
And we are talking about Thomas Lyons today. This guy. He is fascinating.
There is so much on him and so many wild, absolutely unbelievable stories.
So I had never actually heard of Thomas Lyons before until recently on Facebook. The Mohican State Park Facebook page made this little short post about Thomas Lyons and the legend of how Lyons Falls got its name. It caught my attention like no other, and I started looking. I told Amanda about it, and I was like, this has to be my next topic for our podcast. As soon as I started looking into him, almost immediately, I had almost 5 pages of handwritten notes on this man, and he's a trip.
He is a trip. So we actually went to Lyons Falls and did a 5.5-mile hike, which I am still recovering from.
It was beautiful.
On Saturday. It was gorgeous. It was amazing, but my knee for some reason just was not having it, and it's not my knee, it's like all the muscles above my knee that are currently just not happy, but it's okay. Anyway, we went there. We have a story to add to our legend, which we will talk about at some point in time. It's a pretty cool one.
Yes. And let me add that on, the 4th of December, 5th of December, we were hiking in jeans and t-shirts comfortably. It was spectacular out, and we have lots of pictures as usual for you guys.
Yes, so check out the websites, check out Facebook, and we will have those posted.
Yes. So Tom Lyons, he was and if anybody knows better than me how to say this, by all means, please let us know. I'm hoping I'm not completely butchering it. He was a Lenape, Delaware Indian by the name of Kaschates, spelled Kaschates. In his native language, that meant tobacco. So he was fluent in German, he was fluent in English, and he also spoke his native tongue. That just, having studied German for 3 years in high school, I find that impressive.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah. Also, why in the world would somebody be fluent in German who was born in the 1700s, the late 1700s, in what is now New Jersey? Well, to this day, the Amish communities still use this man's name as a boogeyman type of figure. He has all different nicknames that he's gone by over the years. His actual name, and then during some battles that he fought alongside soldiers, they started calling him Thomas Lyons. But he was also known among settlers as Leatherlips. He was apparently known as the ugliest man alive. So he was a imposing figure. He was very large and very ugly. He was known for having protruding lips and silver ornaments all over his ears and in his nose. He was tall with missing teeth and always, always dirty. The man was known for wearing a necklace with 99 tongues strung along it.
Though I did find one book that kind of described him as having skin that looked like elephant skin, and then supposedly his bottom lip drooped down over his chin. I can only imagine what this man looks like.
Well, published in 1880 in The History of Morrow County, that book I found on Google Books said he was the homeliest old devil you'd ever seen. To be described as the ugliest man alive, that has to be pretty impressive, especially in the 17 and 1800s.
Yeah.
So he got around a lot also for not having modern transportation and things. He was born in what is now New Jersey, and they were driven from their home from what I could find somewhere around his 15th to 22nd birthday into Western Pennsylvania, around Lancaster, Pennsylvania. From there, he ended up in Ohio. And when I say he ended up in Ohio, I mean there are stories of this man in the Delaware River area in New Jersey, in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, Tuscarawas County, Ohio, Holmes County, Ohio, in the Mohican River area, Ashland County, Morrow County, Marion County. He lived in Gnadahutton, Ohio, Goshen, Ohio, Helltown, Ohio, Greentown, Ohio, and Upper Sandusky areas. And those are just the places that I found.
He was well traveled.
Yes, he did not stay in any single place very long. And he was, well, let's put it this way. Just in the research that we did online, he has 2 different books written solely about him.
Yeah, one of them is The Indian Who Died 13 Times, or The Man Who Died 13 Times. And the other one is like an Amish specific book. You can buy it, but you have to like go to Holmes County, and that's the only place they sell it.
Yes, so the first book is titled Tom Lyons, The Indian Among the Amish by Wayne R. Miller. And then the second book is Tom Lyons, The Indian Who Died 13 Times by Robert A. Carter. And that just, to have 2 books written solely about you in the first place, I got the sense doing research on him that he was just larger than life in good ways and bad ways.
Which means he's perfect for us to talk about.
Yes. He was infamous throughout a couple of different states. Mostly for his necklace of 99 human tongues. He seemed to get a huge kick out of terrorizing the Amish, the plain people. He would come begging at their door, knowing that they would not hurt him or turn him away. And sometimes he would bring venison or some sort of good to trade and would ask them for cornmeal and flour and different dry goods and food goods that he didn't have as easily accessible to him.
One of the stories I read was he would bring flour and demand that the women bake bread, and if the bread was an ounce less than the amount of flour that he brought, he would like threaten to kill them. So they would just bake bread using his flour and whatever flour they had just lying around, hoping that it would weigh enough.
Yeah, and so a lot of times what he brought would be spoiled and bad. And so these settlers, these folks, they would just take what he brought and wait until he was gone and then take it out back and bury it or feed it to the dogs. And it...
So regardless of whatever he did or did not accomplish in his lifetime, people were scared of this man.
And what he would do is if they refused or were slow, getting to his requests, he would tell them that he had 99 tongues, and before he died, he would make it 100, so don't make it your tongue that makes it 100. And he liked to perpetuate these stories and these tales of battles and things that he had done and people he had killed. And a lot of it wasn't true, but a lot of it was. He was a very well-respected warrior. There are several battles that he was known to have taken part in. The first one being the Battle of Wyoming, which happened on July 3rd in 1778 in northeast Pennsylvania. And he did take part in that, and he was apparently very, very fierce and did take what they believe were actually scalps of his enemies as trophies. He fought in the battle against Colonel Crawford in northern Ohio. I did not find dates on that one.
I didn't either.
Yeah, now there is a school in that area called Colonel Crawford. Actually, my sister-in-law's mom went to school there, graduated from there. He took part in the Battle of Fallen Timbers in 1795 with General Mad Anthony Wayne. And that general is actually the one that gave him his English name of Thomas Lyons. They apparently thought very highly of each other and didn't trust each other enough to turn their backs on one another. And he also fought and took part in cabin burnings and some outer edges battles in the War of 1812. However, by all reports, he was too old to be an effective warrior at that point. In fact, around that same time, he told different missionaries that he was 160 years old. And they came to find out that he believed each season of summer and winter were a year. So he was actually somewhere in his mid-70s to early 80s at that point and still raising hell.
But still, knowing that in 1812 he was in his 70s or 80s, and then I have 2 death years. One is 1824, one is 1829.
Yes.
So we're talking like pushing 90 to 100 back in 1800s.
Yeah, and they didn't know, he didn't seem to know when he was born, and frankly, I don't know that it really mattered to him much.
It really kind of doesn't. I mean, the only thing I found it kind of would have mattered was he supposedly took involvement in something called the Hostetler family massacre in 1757. So I was trying to see, like, if he was born in 1748, then no, at 9 years old he probably wasn't. But
by all supposition from what I found, they believed during the time of that massacre of that family, he was between 18 and 22. So
okay,
in 1957, I feel like we do math every time that we start doing this. Math that
we do, and I don't like it because I am not good at math.
And it's math that I feel like we probably should have been smart enough to do before we started this, and I just didn't think about it.
No, because that means we have to plan ahead.
Who does that?
No one, not us, obviously.
So let's say he was born sometime between 1735 and 1739. And then he died somewhere around 1824 to 1829. Yeah, he was around 90 years old.
Mm-hmm. Which is impressive.
Now, let alone
then. Back then.
Yeah, almost 200 years ago. That's crazy. That was almost 200 years ago.
Yeah, think about that for a second.
So there is actually a book, like we stated before, that is titled Tom Lyons, the Indian Who Died 13 Times. And it seems like Tom really enjoyed making people believe that he was immortal, that he couldn't be killed, and that all of these people had tried to kill him. I actually found a couple of times in the reading that I did that he had certain people believing that he was unable to be harmed by a bullet. And one of the stories of his death actually involved a priest shooting him with a silver bullet, or shooting at him with a silver bullet. So all of these times that he supposedly died, it's actually believed that he was the last Native American in Holmes County, and that he left Holmes County somewhere in the 1810 to 1815 area, and that he went to the Delaware Reservation in Wyandotte and Seneca counties, where he died of natural causes in 1824. We don't even really know if this guy, where or when he died, but as he was living, was one heck of a legend.
But then there's also his death by someone named Joe Haynes in 1829.
Yes.
Which I think the one about him moving to the reservation and dying of natural causes is probably more pliable, because the Joseph Haynes legend is kind of far-fetched.
Yeah, there was an 1870 edition of the Holmes County Farmers Hub that stated Lyons was murdered by Jacob Ammon after bragging about some of his infamous exploits. His body was buried in a cranberry swamp between Mount Hope and Millersburg. According to the article, he was never seen in any part of Holmes County after that day. and no one cared to search for him. It's not funny.
So that
but...
kind of goes along with the Joe Haynes legend, which is Tom Lyons supposedly killed his uncle. And then Joe Haynes went out and shot him in the back and buried him in the Lee's Swamp. I don't know where that is. But then his father or his friend, Joe's father or friend, was like, you need to leave because people are going to be mad about this. And then no one ever heard from Joe again. So
yeah. So that area is actually a really cool area from everything that I found. Tom Lyons, the ugliest man alive, was apparently married to an absolutely stunningly beautiful Wyandot woman, and they had a son named George, of all things. There was a lot of reported sightings and interactions with Tom Lyons and his family in Holmes County between 1805 and 1815. He apparently was living with Chief Kilbuck, which there's a small town in Ohio still called Kilbuck, and there's a massive swamp out there called Kilbuck Swamp. I've driven through it a few times. There's a dirt track, racetrack out that way. Really fun. It's out towards Berlin in Amish country. So he apparently lived down on Dowdy Creek with Chief Kilbuck, and around that time is when Jacob Ammon apparently got sick of his crap and shot him and then buried him out in the swamp. I don't know that that's true because there was plenty of sightings after that. I just love the fact that Tom Lyons was like, yeah, I'm 160 years old. And people just didn't even try to correct him. They're just like, yeah, you are. You betcha.
Mm-hmm. Which goes back to even if the stories about he perpetuated about himself aren't true, people were scared.
Yes. I mean, wouldn't you be? Can you imagine how bad somebody has to be and how much enjoyment they must take out of scaring people to even today have legends among the Amish community and have women telling their children, you better not get too close to those woods, you better be back when you're supposed to be back and behaving, or Tom Lyons is going to get you.
Yeah, you have to be pretty bad.
So, and we're recording this before I get the chance because I don't actually see my farrier again until January, I think 17th. So it's a little over a month. But my farrier, who is farrier's the guy that takes care of my horse's feet, he is Amish. And a lot of his family is from the Lancaster, Pennsylvania area. Apparently, going back to the Hostetler family that Tom Lyons was supposedly involved in the massacre of that family. At that point, he was a fairly young man, and he was building a name for himself as a warrior. He was said to have taken part in this massacre of this family. So they found this cabin somewhere in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and I guess if I actually look, I probably could even tell you about where.
1757 I have as the
Yeah,
year.
I thought I had written down about where, like location, and I might be joking myself here.
You have like 10 pages.
I do.
of
I'm not
notes.
even joking. Yeah, apparently I just wrote down in Pennsylvania, which I feel bad about. I should actually know where in Pennsylvania, but it was somewhere in Lancaster County. This band of Delaware Indians, Lenape Indians, set this cabin on fire. And apparently that's just something they would do when they found a cabin, is set it on fire. If somebody ran out, they would kill them just for sport. They're intruders. As this cabin's on fire, the inhabitants of the cabin waited around and kind of stuck it out and waited for them to lose interest and leave. Well, Tom Lyons stuck around. They had fruit tree orchard around the cabin, and he stopped for a snack. When they didn't see him anymore, see that the band of Indians that set their cabin on fire, they came out of the cabin. Well, he alerted the rest of the band, and they came back, and they killed the majority of the family, and the ones that they didn't kill, they took captive and tortured before they killed. So it was something that the Amish community is very small and tight-knit even today, and a lot of the community in Ohio have ties to Jacob Hochstetler and his family and his community. So it's still something that they talk about and is a big deal. Like Amanda said, to get the one book, you have to actually go to one of the libraries in Berlin, in Holmes County, that is an Amish library. So I was really, really hoping that I would get to see Elmer before recording this because I wanted to see if he had any kind of stories or input on it, but I'll have to ask him when I see him and we'll just do an update.
That would be cool. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, I just Googled it and it said that they were on the edge of the Blue Mountain, which is out by my grandparents' house, actually. Not that's close to home
Isn't
for
that
me.
strange how we have all these ties to this different stuff? He was also born in New Jersey.
Yes, he was. I don't know what that's like at all.
Right?
I was born in New Jersey, but moved to California after I think I was 3 or 4 months old, so I was a baby when we did that move. But anyway, moving on.
One of those little connections. Let's see. So Amanda and I went out to Mohican. So all of this research and everything started with that Facebook post from the Mohican State Forest Facebook page. And we're like, okay, well, that's not that far from here. We're having spectacular weather for December in central Ohio. Let's go. There are 2 possibilities with the naming of Lyons Falls. On that trail, the trail is called the Lyons Falls Trail. And there are 2 waterfalls. And there's Little Lyons Falls, and then there's Big Lyons Falls. We have pictures of all of it. They're both spectacular. And there is an old stagecoach road that runs actually where the modern day bridle trail, horse trail is. I've ridden that trail countless times before and didn't have a clue that it used to be a stagecoach road. So that area was really cool. I haven't hiked back there since about high school. And I don't know, Amanda, had you ever been there before? Had you ever hiked that before?
I have not been there. I have never hiked that before. It was gorgeous.
We explored everything. It was so much fun. There was a cave. We did some rock climbing. Then we saw the sign that we're not supposed to do that. And oops, tell anybody.
I mean, it happens. We weren't the first people by the judge of the tramp down leaves, so.
No, it was a lot of fun. But there are 2 possibilities for why Lyons Falls has the name Lyons Falls. So one is the legend. One of Tom Lyons' 13 lives apparently ended. I'm going to start thinking of this guy as like a giant cat, like a forest cat that has 13 lives instead of 9, or 14 lives, I guess. But anyway, one of his 13 lives apparently ended on that stagecoach trail in the middle of the Mohican Forest.
Or the swamp. Or the cranberry bog, depending upon which legend you choose to believe.
Yeah, I'm telling you, he had lives like a big cat. But it was that part of Mohican at the time was obviously not a state park. And I don't believe it was until, if I'm remembering, 1967, maybe 65, that it was officially became a state park. So back in the 17 and 1800s, it was not a state park, but it is a beautiful, secluded river valley. And to this day, there's a reservation very close to, on the edge of the state park. And it was a well-known area for different bands of outlaws and renegades to lay low. So Tom Lyons apparently was ambushed and killed along that stagecoach road. Now, not to be confused with, there is a trail called the Stagecoach Trail, which we didn't get a chance to go down because, well, we were tired.
We were really tired, and my knee hurt so bad.
We'll go back. I mean,
we will go back.
We'll probably go back before the winter's over. But we did not get to do the Stagecoach Trail, which is a short cut-through trail between 2 legs of the Lyons Falls Trail. And I think we'll try to screenshot and post a trail map just for reference if anybody cares to look. And there is also the legend of a settler named Paul Lyons. And the legend of Paul Lyons is actually somewhat similar to Tom Lyons, but he was said to be a very self-sufficient, secluded settler who roamed the hills and lived out in that area of the forest with his milk cow. And apparently there was a storm and his milk cow got lost. And so he went searching on this dark, stormy night with his lantern looking for his cow. And he fell from the top of Big Lyons Falls to the bottom, which is 80 feet, give or take a few. and died.
Oh, from Big Lions Falls?
Yeah.
80 feet. Yeah, right. Try like more 100, 150.
Well, again, though, I mean, like we were kind of saying when we were out there, it's probably dug out more now than it was 200 years ago.
That's true.
But yeah, for some reason, whatever reason, the legend says 80-foot fall. And apparently to this day, which I don't know how people know this because the park's not open after dark. You're not allowed to hike out there after dark, but you know how that goes.
You're also not supposed to go climbing on the cliffs, Andrea.
I couldn't resist, okay? It was calling my name.
I know.
I saw a big hole in the rock and I had to go sit in it. You went with me.
Yeah, well, you twisted my arm really hard.
From where I was sitting in the hole in the rock.
50 feet away, yes.
I have really long arms, but they're not that impressive.
50 feet away, up an incline in a cave that was, 4 off the ground?
It was more than that. I made a total fool of myself getting up there.
Oh, no, it was about 4 feet because oh no, I guess it was taller than that.
Because I have a 37-inch inseam and I had to jump.
So, Paul Lyons... We did not do anything illegal, I promise.
No.
Paul Lyons, during this storm, went out after his cow and wound up falling off the falls. And now you can, apparently, during stormy nights, hear cows mooing or see lantern lights swinging in the distance.
Or hear the cowbell.
So, I don't know if... I did a little bit more digging on Paul Lyons, but he actually died in 1856 in a logging accident.
Really?
I forget what it was. I think it was something like he was cutting log and it just happened to fall on him weird.
Oof.
And while he was more of a loner, he wasn't a hermit recluse. He had a wife and a son, and actually was very friendly with his neighbors. Although he wasn't super social with them, he was very friendly with them. And supposedly his wife was sent to an asylum after his death, and his son decided to move out west where he prospered. That's all I could find was he prospered. I don't know what he did, but...
Huh. That's pretty good. I didn't look that far into him. That's really cool. That's all news to me.
I figured it'd be good to have kind of both people represented because Paul Lyons is actually who the falls is supposed to be named after, not Tom Lyons, but Tom Lyons is much more fun than Paul Lyons.
Well, and even like when you look on the ODNR website about Lyons Falls, it names both of them. So it does. I think it's partially some of the... Tom Lyons was just a character. And the thing was, as much as he portrayed himself to be such a horrible person and wanted people to be afraid of him, there's a lot of references as well to the missionaries and some of the settlers at that time, especially towards the end of his life, that all report really liking him. So he portrayed himself as this horrible, mean-tempered old curmudgeon that would take your tongue if you crossed him. But there's also reports of, it was said that he had this necklace of tongues. And I don't know about you guys, but again, going back to my Louis L'Amour obsession and my Western books obsession, I've never heard of any kind of native warrior taking tongues as a trophy. It was always a scalp. Across different tribes in different areas, they took scalps, not tongues. And that was one thing that stuck out to me when I first heard this legend was, why in the world would this guy take human tongues as trophies? Like, that just doesn't line up with anything that I've ever heard story-wise about a Native American warrior. And I think part of where that came from is he did take scalps, and then what he told settlers in his older age, or some of the missionaries in his older age, especially when he got into the whiskey, that they were actually deer tongues. They were not human scalps. And I think, like we've talked about in several episodes now, with the whole telephone game of oral history, that it got transposed from human scalps to human tongues, somewhere between human scalps and deer tongues.
That would make sense. I did find one weird thing that said he pickled the tongues.
Well,
but that was all I could find.
Oh my goodness. Just that description. So I have in my head this...
Just a bunch of tongues in a pickle jar.
Oh, well, no, not even that. But just, the image of him in my head of this. He was said to have a very narrow face, high cheekbones, protruding lips, drooping lips, a big protruding nose and silver ornamentation in his lips and his nose and his ears, and a necklace of pickled tongues. Ugh.
Mm-hmm.
That just this like just the smell I'm imagining. Ugh.
Yep.
It's gonna be a while before I look at a pickle the same way. Yeah. And I think he played up the character a lot from everything that I could find. I mean, the guy has 2 separate books solely about him, start to finish, in his life. I mean, they're not like New York bestsellers, but he has 2 books written about him. And he was mentioned in countless other history books. So, the other thing, a lot of different early mentions of him actually called him a chief. And he was not a chief in any way. He was actually a fairly pedestrian warrior, which, today there's nothing pedestrian about a warrior like that, but they were not necessarily a huge political part of the tribes. But he was also at all of these different battles, and he knew a general gave him his name. And he was apparently part of some of the different peace treaties that were signed. And so he was never officially a chief from anything that I could find, and it's mentioned several times later in the research in timeline that he most definitely was not a chief, but he seemed to have this talent of putting himself in a good position and just being part of whatever was going to keep him front and center in the papers, so to speak.
Yeah, so that's the thing with him is he was an accomplished warrior and did do some of these things, but trying to figure out which ones he did, which ones he says he did, which ones he did, but not to the extent that he actually was a part of it is difficult to figure out, and I think at this point in time, kind of impossible.
And that, I think, is some of I don't even want to use the word romance because it's pretty gruesome still, but just some of the wonder and mystery of the whole legend of Tom Lyons. One thing that, with him being so well known and used as such a boogeyman figure in the Amish community for nearly 200 years, the book by Wayne Miller, the title Tom Lyons, An Indian Among the Amish, I have not gotten a chance to actually read the book. I did find a couple of pages of an excerpt from it on one of the websites, and he found some very compelling evidence that Tom Lyons was actually not part of the massacre at the Hostetler homestead. He was most likely not even in the state of Pennsylvania at that point. By 1757, he was actually taking part in some battles that were on the opposite side of the state. So from what I read and what I could understand, he most likely put himself into that situation just by telling people, and used that threat so often throughout the Amish community in the years after that they believed him. Why wouldn't they believe him? They weren't necessarily there, and he wasn't necessarily there, but they didn't know that, and he used it to his advantage to get bread, to get food, to trade, and not necessarily have to trade anything in return. And
yeah,
from what I can tell of his personality, just getting to know him a little bit through the reading and things, he got a kick out of it.
I can totally see him being in a retirement home on a rocking chair, scaring the living daylights out of his grandkids, and then just laughing his butt off about it.
And having been just enough of a badass that it was believable, and you didn't necessarily know what he'd actually done and what he hadn't done, and him loving every second out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Everything about him just seems like this massive personality, and depending on where you read and what you read, he was feared and hated and disgusting. And then he was liked by the missionaries. He had a stunningly beautiful Wyandot wife that he apparently went out of his way to dress finely and parade around, and treated her like some sort of Indian princess, is I believe the words that were used over and over again in the reading. So he liked the attention. He liked to be a living tall tale.
Which kind of brings me in my train of thought to the story I promised you guys at the beginning of what happened while we were at the Lyons Falls. So a couple times on our hike, Andrea kept stopping and she kept swearing that she saw something breaking up the skyline. So, like, the ridges above where we were walking, the sun was, like, just above the ridges. And she kept swearing she kept seeing something break in the skyline, but there was no noise. There were no other people. The horse trails are closed. There were no deer and just there were birds, but they weren't flapping around. They were just kind of sticking to their trees.
There was a lot of people out hiking that day because it was a spectacular day in the beginning of December in Ohio. But the people hiking trail was not up on that side of the ridge. The horse trail is, which is also the old Stagecoach Road.
So we were on our way back and we hit a section of trail and she stops again. And I'm like, okay, what did you see this time? She goes, no, we are being followed. And I stop and I take a minute. I'm like, yeah, I think we kind of are. And we both turn around and there's no one behind us. So me being me and me being weird, I go, okay, Tom Lyons, if that's you, we're going to tell your story.
And
oh my goodness.
Out of nowhere, with nothing beforehand and nothing after, this just very concentrated arrow of cold air just blasted over us.
Like, we had been walking and, taking off our sweatshirts because it was around 50 degrees. So it was nice out. My shins, when I am walking, do not get cold. They were freezing. Andrea got goosebumps.
Yeah.
And so we were like, okay, that was weird.
Now, mind you, we were also standing in a very narrow part of the trail that looks like it's a part of an old creek bed almost. And so any breeze is going to be channeled right towards us. But again, it only happened almost in response to us being goofballs and, we were out there looking for Tom Lyons.
And so the first time it happens, you can write it off as, oh, it was a weird breeze with good timing. When I repeated, are you okay with us telling your story? It happens again.
Exactly the way that it did the first time.
You kind of got to stop and think about that. And then it didn't happen before that, and it didn't happen after that. It was just the 2 times, and it only lasted 2 or 3 seconds. It was not a long breeze or cold spot at all.
No, just almost an exhale. And then Amanda asked, do you not want us to tell your story? And nothing. So
absolutely nothing.
It was kind of cool. It was, who am I joking? It was really cool. And
it was really cool. Once again, probably a logical explanation, but I'm going to let myself have this.
Right. It honestly most likely was just where we were standing. It was like, 2:30, 3 o'clock at that point. So the sun was starting to go down. Air pressure was starting to change. I'm sure there's a scientific reason for it, but part of the legend. And you know what? We're not here to scientifically explain everything away because I know I'm personally loving all the research and the legend. And we're not going to be able to go and explore every single legend that we talk about, especially as we start branching out of Ohio eventually. But for right now, we can go look at some of this stuff. And like Amanda and I went to the gorge overlook out at Mohican, and I got to introduce her to that. That was awesome, by the way.
That's so pretty out there.
Sorry, squirrel. But we're not here to explain it all away. And it was kind of fun to have an experience like that when part of the legend is that people will see a fully clothed warrior, Native American warrior, darting between the trees. And there was one point when we were hiking that we were up towards the top of the ridge on the trail, and it was about when I kept seeing out of the corner of my eye something break the sunlight between the trees. After about the 3rd time that happened, we heard a hawk screech. And that was the only time. And then we also saw, when we were initially hiking, because we checked out a Bigfoot site too while we were there, because, why not? But we also saw a blue heron that was resting. Got some really cool pictures of that. But when we were on the trail too, not even when we were on the trail, when we were actually at Big Lions Falls, when we were standing in the basin at Big Lions Falls, we looked straight up, and in this sliver of blue sky, there was a bald eagle circling above the falls. So it was really, really cool.
It made my birding heart so happy.
But all of it, and again, we're loving and getting into the spirit of the legends, so to speak. Part of what people report seeing out there is a fully clothed Native American warrior darting between the trees. They report hearing different bird calls at that same time. And if they're out there doing things they shouldn't be doing or behaving in ways that Tom Lyons doesn't like, they report feeling a cold breeze or tripping over something suddenly with no reason for it and hearing a bird call. So we got to experience some of that. At least we can make it into that in our heads at the very, very least.
Which I'm going to gladly do.
Yes. But it was a lot of fun. We have a ridiculous amount of pictures. It was a gorgeous day. The scope of the falls. I think I was probably in junior high or early high school the last time that I hiked out there. We've ridden out there a lot, but we haven't actually tied the horses off and climbed down the stairs to the bottom of the falls. So I personally had forgotten just the enormity of Big Lions Falls. And there's all sorts of... We did find a stone carving of Tom Lyons, and there's a picture of that. But there's all sorts of different names and dates etched into the sandstone, and
1890 or 1870.
Yeah, this one is W.A. Rogers, July 4th, 1870. And it was etched probably, 8 or 10 feet up on the wall?
Oh, easily.
And there was also probably a foot to 18 inches tall and about 6 feet long. Somebody had etched prom with a question mark, and the question mark is dotted with a heart into it.
Which I have told my husband that is the only way I will be accepting date requests from now on.
Yeah, like...
As if they're carved in stone.
Girls, do not accept anything less than a stone-carved prom proposal. That's pretty awesome. But we'll put pictures up of that too, and have some pictures of Amanda standing by the edge of the rock because...
Like a dork.
Well, you know what? You got dorky pictures of me too.
Hey, it's blackmail. So if you share mine, I'll share yours. And then we can be dorks together.
But see, that's where you run into the whole part of, I have no shame on stuff like that. So is it really blackmail?
That is true. And we're already dorks together. We're doing this podcast, so.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? It's so much fun.
It's so much fun.
But yeah, if you're in the area, if you're anywhere near the area, if you're not anywhere near the area and feel like taking a day trip, go visit Mohican. It's absolutely hair-raisingly beautiful. There's all sorts of history. There's all sorts of legends. And it is an enormous state park. And it is something special.
Bring your kids, bring your dogs. There are easier trails, or if you're into actually hiking, there are some more difficult trails, which we found.
And I cannot wait to go back. We are so going and doing that Gorge Overlook Trail. Like, I don't know if I can wait until spring. So you better wrap your knee up and ice it.
Oh, my knee and my ankle are getting wrapped, and I am taking all of the Advil. Anyway.
All right, before we get too slap happy.
If you have any questions or comments or experiences out at Mohican or experiences anywhere else, feel free to email us. Our email is the letters ANA, talltales@gmail.com, or Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all that good stuff. We also have a beautiful website that you can submit comments to, so check that out. We will be posting all of our photos and excess stuff on that website. So
we're learning. If you have tips and tricks, we're happy to hear it. But mostly we want to hear your stories. And if you feel up to it, give us a review, let other people hear us, and tell your friends, all that good stuff.
And if you go visit any spooky, scary legend places, as always, be respectful. Just be good people.
Make good choices.
And make good choices. And we will see you next time.
Until...
Oh, wait, we didn't do a teaser.
Oh, no, wait. So we actually have our first out-of-state one next time.
We do. So I believe it was the first, if not one of the first recommendations, is Clinton Road in West Milford, New Jersey.
I cannot
And oh
wait.
my goodness, you guys, this is going to be a fun one.
So, yes, tune in next time. We will be every other Wednesday is our release dates. So set up your alerts and stay tuned for Clinton Road. This is coming out after Christmas, but it's the only opportunity I'm going to get to say Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, possibly. I hope everybody enjoys time with their family or time to themselves or whatever makes you happy.
Yes.
So,
I wish you all the happiness in the world.
until next time.
And we will see you next time. This has been A&A Tall Tales, an independently written, recorded, and produced podcast. Our intro sounds are Crackling Fireplace by Julius H. and Nightwoods by Widget Studios. Our intro song is Harmonica Solo by Julius H. This podcast is intended for entertainment purposes only.